The carriage is waiting. You must go now.
I don't know if I can.
It's for your safety, please.
All right.
Dawn did not arrive gently at Crawford Ranch. It crept in like a warning, pale and cold, laying its hand across the land as if testing how much grief still lived there. The wind carried old memories with it, sharp and restless, whispering that nothing stays buried forever. Some mornings change a man's life without asking permission, and this was one of them. Dawn settled over Crawford Ranch like a cold warning. Samuel Crawford stood on the wide, front porch with his shoulders squared and a pocket, watch open in his palm. The ticking sounded too loud in the stillness. The stagecoach was late. February wind cut across the Montana land like a sharpened blade, driving loose snow across the yard and rattling the dry boards beneath his boots. The ranch house behind him stood tall and solid, built to last generations, but its rooms had echoed for 3 long years. Since Sarah died, the house felt hollow, like a body missing its heart. Samuel cooked for one, ate alone, spoke to his horses more than to people, and sometimes forgot what another human voice sounded like across a breakfast table. That loneliness was why he had sent for a mail-order bride. It had felt practical on paper. A woman needed security. A ranch needed a woman's hands. And he needed company without risking the kind of love that left a man, ruined when it was torn away. It was meant to be simple, clean, a contract without emotion to trip over. A low cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Samuel straightened, snapping the watch closed as the stagecoach finally appeared, its wheels grinding through frozen mud. He reached into his vest pocket and touched Sarah's ring. He no longer wore it, but he could not let it go. His throat tightened as the coach rolled to a stop with a harsh spray of slush. The driver leaned down with a grin that carried mean humor. "Your package, Crawford." A woman stepped down. She moved carefully, wrapped in dark clothes, a heavy black veil covering her face. Every step looked measured, like someone used to being watched and judged. Samuel took one step forward, ready to greet her. But the practiced words vanished before they reached his mouth. "Mr. Crawford." Her voice was calm, polite, steady. "I'm Clara Bennett." She lifted the veil. Samuel froze. The right side of her face was marked by burn scars stretching from temple to jaw, pulling her smile slightly off-center. The left side remained untouched, gentle, almost soft. The contrast struck him like a blow. His breath caught, and his mind emptied of every polite phrase he had rehearsed. Clara saw the shock land on him. She had seen that look before. Many times. Her chin lifted with quiet resolve. "The agency didn't tell you," she said evenly. "I understand if the contract is void." She hesitated only a moment. "I can take the next coach east." Samuel stared, his heart pounding too hard for his chest. He had imagined someone plain, someone easy, someone who would fade quietly into the background of his life. He had not imagined a woman who looked like she had survived fire itself and still stood upright. Her eyes held no plea, only strength. In the still morning air, Sarah's voice stirred in his memory, clear as if she stood beside him. "Do the right thing. Be better than your fear." "The agreement stands," Samuel said at last, his voice rough. "Welcome to Crawford Ranch. Miss Bennett." Surprise flickered across Clara's face. Just a widening of her eyes, but it struck him hard. The driver snorted and spat into the snow. "Good luck, Crawford. You'll need it." Samuel ignored him and lifted Clara's trunk. She walked toward the porch with her back straight, stepped steady despite exhaustion. Watching her cross the threshold felt like watching a stranger step directly into his future. He did not know what kind of man he would have to become to deserve her trust. Inside, Clara moved through the house with an unreadable expression. Torn curtains hung limp. Dust clung to every surface. The kitchen felt bare and lonely. She said nothing. She took off her coat, rolled her sleeves, and began to clean. "You don't have to do that," Samuel said awkwardly. "Where do you keep the cleaning rags?" she asked, not looking up. "Under the basin." She found them. Before he finished speaking and wiped the table with calm, practiced strokes. "I'll show you the bedrooms," he tried again. "You should take the—" "I'll take the maid's room." She nodded toward the small room off the kitchen. "That one." "That's not right," he said. "You should have the proper bedroom." She finally met his eyes. "Mr. Crawford, let's be clear. I'm here to keep house, cook, mend, and work. Nothing more is expected or offered. The small room is fine. Her words were not sharp. Just final, a boundary laid down with quiet strength. Samuel stood useless while she returned to cleaning. Dinner was simple, salt pork and beans. Clara cooked with the skill of someone used to making something out of very little. They sat across from each other, the silence thick. "How long have you been alone here?" Clara asked softly. 3 years. My wife died in childbirth, he said, the words delivered like a memorized line. I'm sorry, Clara said. It was God's will. He no longer believed that, but he did not know how else to answer. When they finished eating, the unsigned marriage license on the mantel seemed to stare at them, but neither mentioned it. Clara washed the dishes with careful movements. Samuel escaped to the barn, pretending the horses needed him. When he finally returned hours later, her door was closed, a thin line of lamplight glowing beneath it. Samuel lay awake in his own room, listening to the quiet sounds of her presence. He did not know who she had been before the fire. He did not know her fears or her hopes. He only knew she was brave, and that terrified him. In her small room, Clara stared out the window, touching her scars out of habit. 1 week, she whispered to her reflection. If he sends me back, I'll go west. Start new. She always survived. She did not know she had already changed something in Samuel Crawford. Saturday arrived under a cold sky and restless wind. Samuel and Clara rode into town for supplies. Clara wore her veil again. Samuel noticed her shoulders tighten as Bitterroot came into view, but he said nothing. The wagon rattled over frozen ruts, each jolt a reminder of the world waiting to judge. Town bustled with Saturday crowds until they stepped down from the wagon. Then the air shifted. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Clara lowered her eyes. Heat rose in Samuel's neck. Mrs. Hartwell, the preacher's wife, approached with a smile edged in pity. Mr. Crawford, and this must be your arrangement, she said loudly. Bless you, dear. And bless you, Mr. Crawford, for such Christian charity. Clara's jaw tightened. We need supplies, Samuel said flatly. Inside the store, eyes followed Clara everywhere. Whispered laughter drifted from fabric bolts. Samuel wanted to speak, to shield her, but his words tangled uselessly. Outside, Marcus Dalton waited, tall and smug. Didn't know the mail order service ran a charity, he sneered. Clara lifted a sack of flour and ignored him. Samuel said nothing. The ride home was long and silent. You don't owe me defense, Clara said quietly. Maybe I owe myself one, Samuel answered. That night, the unsigned license lay between them. Samuel stared at the blank space beside his name and thought of fear, of shame, of Sarah's voice. He signed. Clara emerged from her room, eyes wide, hands trembling as she added her name. Clara Bennett Crawford. The contract became something else entirely, fragile and uncertain, but real. Spring crept in slowly. The house began to change under Clara's steady hands. Curtains were sewn. Floors shone. One morning, Samuel found his coat mended perfectly. Your stitches are beautiful, he said. Thank you. March brought a blizzard that trapped them together for days. Silence softened. Laughter returned. Clara read aloud from old poetry. Samuel listened to how alive the house felt. When she fell asleep by the fire, he carried her to bed, hands shaking. Something shifted between them, fragile and unspoken. The days grew longer. They planted a garden side by side. Samuel brought her blue calico fabric. She held it like treasure. On the porch one evening, Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. Samuel touched her scarred cheek, then hesitated. Fear slipped in. Clara stepped away. The distance returned sharper than before. In town, whispered pity cut deep. Marcus Dalton's cruelty followed her home in the form of an offer soaked in poison. When Samuel answered her question with hesitation, it shattered everything. By dawn, Clara walked away down the road toward Bitterroot. Her trunk heavy, her heart heavier still. Samuel watched her go, too afraid to run after her, not yet knowing this was the moment that would break him open. The house fell. Silent the moment Clara disappeared down the road, the quiet settling in like fresh snow over a grave. Samuel stood at the window long after she vanished from sight, his chest tight, his hands useless at his sides. The blue calico fabric lay folded on the kitchen table, untouched, waiting for hands that would never cut it now. Under it rested her note, the words polite and careful. apologizing for taking up space in a life that never truly made room for her. He crumpled the paper and let it fall. For 3 days, he did not pick it up. He moved through the ranch like a man walking underwater, everything muffled, heavy, distant. He cooked for one again. He ate little, slept less. Every sound felt wrong without Clara's quiet presence. Her steady footsteps, the soft hum she never realized she made while working. The house was no longer just empty. It was accusing. On the 4th day, rain came, cold and relentless, soaking the land until mud clung to everything. Samuel rode out to the small hill where Sarah lay buried. The ground slick beneath his boots. He removed his hat and stood there, shoulders slumped, rain running down his face unchecked. "I thought avoiding love would keep me safe," he whispered. "I thought it would spare me this." His voice broke. "But I lost her anyway. And maybe I lost you too." Holding on to fear like it was wisdom. He stood there until the rain soaked him through, until his bones ached. "I'm still alive," he said hoarsely. "And I've been choosing wrong." Something cracked open then. Quiet but deep, like ice breaking beneath a river. That night, Samuel drank alone in the barn, the bottle dulling nothing. Old Moses found him slumped against a stall, eyes glassy, spirit worse. The old ranch hand grabbed him by the collar, hauling him upright with surprising strength. "You're a damn fool," Moses growled. "That woman looked at you like you were the last good thing on earth, and you let her walk because you were scared." Samuel shook his head. "Don't talk about Sarah." Moses's eyes hardened. "I knew Sarah," he snapped. "And she'd box your ears for this. She'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. Fix it." The words struck deeper than any blow. Fear, pride, grief, all of it buckled under the weight of that truth. Samuel sobered slowly, painfully, clarity burning as it came. He had let Clara go because he feared failing her. But letting her leave was the worst failure of all. Meanwhile, Clara sat alone in a narrow boarding house room in Bitterroot. The walls thin, the air smelling of boiled cabbage and coal smoke. A stagecoach ticket to Philadelphia lay on the nightstand. Mrs. Hartwell had offered her. Respectable work caring for an elderly, widow, safe, quiet, a small life inside narrow walls. Clara stared out the window at wagons rolling past. Families laughing, children clinging to skirts. Her fingers traced the familiar lines of her scars. The ache was old, steady. She picked up the ticket, held it for a long moment, then tore it cleanly in. Half. She would not run again. She had survived fire. She had survived cruelty. She would survive heartbreak, too. Whatever came next would be chosen, not accepted out of fear. Sunday morning dawned clear and sharp. Samuel rode into town, clean-shaven, coat pressed, shoulders squared like a man heading to judgment. Church bells rang as he passed the building, people filing inside. Clara saw him from her window and felt her chest tighten, assuming he was moving on without her. She turned away, swallowing hard. But Samuel did not take a seat. He walked into that church as if marching toward truth itself. The Reverend stopped mid-sentence. Whispers rippled through the pews as Samuel removed his hat and walked down the center aisle. Clara froze, breath shaking. "Clara Bennett Crawford," Samuel said, his voice steady and full. "I am a coward and a fool." The words landed heavy in the quiet room. "I was scared to love again. Scared I'd fail you, like I failed. Sarah," Clara's eyes filled with tears, she did. "Not try to hide. But I don't regret a single day since you arrived. You made my house a home. You made me want to be better." The church was silent as a grave. "I let you walk because I was afraid." That was wrong. That was cruel. "And I'm asking you now, not out of duty, not out of contract, but as a man who loves his wife." He extended his hand. "Come home." Marcus Dalton stood abruptly. "Crawford, you're embarrassing yourself." Samuel didn't look at him. "Judge her scars," he said. "Judge mine first. I've been walking dead for 3 years. She had courage when I had none." Clara rose slowly, tears streaming. "You hurt me," she whispered. "I know," Samuel said. "Let me spend the rest of my life making it right." Her hand shook as she placed it in his. Moses started clapping. Others followed. Not all, but enough. Samuel led Clara out into the sunlight. "Let's go home," he said softly. They rode back together, hands clasped, the road ahead uncertain but shared. The ranch looked different when they returned, as if it had been holding its breath. June arrived warm and green. Tomatoes ripened, wildflowers bloomed along the fences. 2 rocking chairs sat close together on the porch now. Clara read aloud in the evenings. Samuel listened, not to the words but to the life in her voice. She no longer hid her scars. She wore her hair back. She met the world head-on. One night, fireflies dancing over the meadow. Clara leaned against Samuel's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "That first day, not sending me back." He took her hand. "I regret every day I wasted being afraid," he said. "I should have loved you from the start." She kissed him, warm and sure. "Worth the wait?" she whispered. "Worth everything," he replied. They sat together as night settled over Crawford Ranch. The house glowing behind them, 2 broken souls who had built something whole, not in spite of their scars, but because of them. The ride back to Crawford Ranch felt different than any journey Samuel had taken before. The road was the same stretch of dirt and ruts, the same fences lining the fields, but something unseen had shifted. Clara sat beside him on the wagon seat, their hands clasped tightly, not tentative now but certain, as if letting go might send everything unraveling again. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. The sound of the wheels and the steady breathing of the horses filled the space where doubt had lived for too long. When the ranch house came into view, Clara's chest tightened. She had walked away from that place believing she would never return, believing it was another door closed to her forever. Now it stood waiting, weathered but solid, like a man who had finally learned how to stand again. Samuel helped her down, his touch careful but no longer afraid. Inside, the house seemed to recognize her. Light slanted through clean windows onto polished floors she had scrubbed with her own hands. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap and wood smoke. Clara set her small bag down and stood still, unsure for the first time since coming back. "I don't expect things to be easy," Samuel said quietly. "I only promise they'll be honest." Clara nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." The days that followed were not some sudden fairy tale. They were cautious, deliberate, built on small choices made daily. Clara moved back into the house fully, though she kept the maid's room a while longer, not out of stubbornness but habit. Samuel did not push. He learned that love, like trust, had to be invited. He began doing things he had never thought to do before. He spoke up in town when eyes lingered too long. He stood beside her, close enough that his presence was unmistakable. The first time Marcus Dalton crossed their path again, it happened outside the general store. Dalton smirked, ready with a cruel remark. But Samuel stepped forward before he could speak. "You will address my wife with respect or not at all," he said, voice low and dangerous. Dalton laughed it off, but something in Samuel's eyes made him back away. Clara watched it all, her heart pounding. Something warm blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with pity or gratitude. It was safety. Real safety. Summer settled in slowly. Work on the ranch grew heavier as the days lengthened. Clara learned the rhythms of the land. The best times to plant, when storms usually rolled in. How Samuel liked his coffee strong and his silence respected in the mornings. Samuel, in turn, learned Clara's quiet tells. How she went still when she was hurt. How she needed space before she needed comfort. He learned that her scars ached when the weather turned, that she slept lightly, that firelight sometimes made her flinch. He never asked about the fire, not yet. He sensed it was a story she would offer when ready, not one to be taken. One evening, after a long day of mending fences, Samuel found Clara in the garden, dirt smudged on her cheek, hair pulled back, her scarred side fully visible in the golden light. She looked up at him and smiled without hesitation. Something in his chest gave way then, a final piece of fear loosening its grip. He crossed the distance between them and kissed her, slow and gentle, his hand resting against her cheek without flinching. Clara leaned into him, her breath hitching, tears sliding free. "You're not afraid," she whispered. "I am," he answered honestly. "But I won't let it stop me again." That night, she moved into the main bedroom. It was not rushed. It was not taken. It was chosen together. Weeks passed. The ranch flourished under their shared care. Even old Moses noticed the change, grumbling less, watching Samuel with a knowing look. "Took you long enough," he muttered one morning. Clara began to laugh more freely, the sound surprising even herself. She stopped wearing the veil entirely. In town, whispers still followed, but they softened, dulled by repetition and Samuel's unyielding presence at her side. Not everyone approved. Mrs. Hartwell's smile remained thin, but her words grew careful. People adjusted. They always did. One afternoon, while sewing on the porch, Clara finally spoke of the fire. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. She told Samuel about the boarding house, the overturned lamp, the way flames moved faster than fear, the smell of smoke that never quite left her memory. Samuel listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hand wrapped firmly around hers. When she finished, he kissed her scarred cheek with reverence. "You survived," he said, "and you came back stronger." Clara closed her eyes, something easing inside her that had been knotted for years. Trouble did not vanish entirely. Late summer brought a drought, cattle growing restless, tempers in town running hot. Marcus Dalton tried once more to provoke Samuel over grazing land. This time, Samuel did not rise to bait or threats. He handled it with calm authority, drawing lines without violence. Dalton lost interest when there was no reaction to feed on. The ranch endured. As autumn approached, the house filled with preparations for winter. Clara canned vegetables, Samuel stacked wood. Evenings grew cooler, the fire burning steady. One night, Samuel placed a small box on the table between them. Inside lay Sarah's ring. Clara stiffened. "I don't want to replace her," she said quickly. "You couldn't," Samuel replied, "and I wouldn't ask you to. But this ring held love once. I want it to hold love again. If you'll have it." Clara slipped it on, tears shining. "I don't want to live in her shadow," she said softly. "You won't," he promised. "You'll walk beside me." The first snow of the season fell early, light and quiet. Clara stood at the window, watching flakes drift down. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. "A home?" Samuel wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Neither did I." Outside, the land slept, waiting for spring. Inside, the house was alive, warmed by shared breath, shared courage, and a love forged not from perfection, but from survival and choice. Winter did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, testing the edges of the land the same way fear once tested Samuel's heart. Frost gathered on fence posts in the mornings, and the creek along the far pasture skimmed over with ice. Clara woke earlier now, moving through the house with a quiet confidence that no longer asked permission. She wore her hair back, her scars uncovered. Her posture no longer braced for judgment. The ranch had become hers in a way paper never could. Samuel watched her from doorways sometimes, struck by how naturally she fit into the life he had once believed was finished. They were not perfect. Some nights Clara woke gasping from old memories, the smell of smoke trapped in her mind. Samuel learned to sit beside her until her breathing slowed, saying nothing, just being there. Other nights Samuel woke staring into darkness, grief for Sarah surfacing without warning. Clara learned when to hold him and when to let silence do the work. Love did not erase pain. It made room for it. December brought heavy snow and long nights. The ranch shrank inward. The world reduced to firelight, shared meals, and the soft creak of rocking chairs on the porch when weather allowed. One evening, as Clara mended a shirt by lamplight, Samuel watched her fingers move with practiced ease. "You know," he said slowly, "I thought bringing you here would be the safe choice." Clara looked up. "And was it?" He shook his head. "No, it was the bravest thing I ever did, even if I didn't know it at the time." She smiled, small but real. Christmas came quietly. No tree, no town celebration. Samuel placed a simple ribbon around a tin of Clara's favorite tea. Clara gave him a scarf she had knitted from leftover yarn. They laughed at the simplicity of it, at how full it felt anyway. On New Year's morning, Clara stood on the porch wrapped in a shawl, watching snow fall across the fields. "I used to measure my life in weeks," she said. "How long I could stay somewhere before I had to leave." Samuel joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "What do you measure it in now?" She thought for a moment. "Days I choose to stay." Spring returned slower than expected. Late storms dragged into April, testing patience and resolve. But when the thaw finally came, it came all at once. Mud turned fields into rivers. Calves were born strong and loud. The land breathed again. Clara planted flowers along the fence line, wild colors against raw earth. Samuel repaired the barn roof, humming tunelessly, something he would have sworn he'd never do again. Town changed too, inch by inch. Familiar faces softened. Children waved. A few women still whispered, but their words no longer found purchase. Clara walked the streets without her veil, meeting eyes directly. Some looked away. Some smiled. Both outcomes were acceptable now. One afternoon, as Clara hung laundry, she found the old note she had written, the one Samuel had dropped and never picked up. It had slipped under a cabinet. She stared at it for a long time, then fed it to the fire without a word. That version of herself no longer lived here. In late May, Samuel brought out the marriage license again, now creased and worn. "We never marked the date," he said. Clara laughed softly. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," he answered. "Because I want to remember the day fear stopped deciding for us. They chose the date of her return, not her arrival. The day love was chosen freely. Summer returned full and generous. The garden flourished. The porch filled with laughter. One evening, fireflies drifted across the meadow, glowing like sparks that did not burn. Clara leaned into Samuel, her head resting easily on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that first morning?" she asked. "The veil. The silence," Samuel nodded. "Every day." He turned toward her, his fingers tracing the familiar lines of her scars, not with hesitation now, but with reverence. "I thought scars meant something was broken beyond repair," he said. "Turns out they're proof something survived." Clara kissed him, slow and sure. The ranch settled into night, the house warm behind them, light spilling through windows that no longer held ghosts. Two broken souls sat side by side, not healed by forgetting, but made whole by choosing each other every day. The wind still moved across the land, but it no longer hunted. It passed over Crawford Ranch gently now, as if even it understood that something strong had taken root there at last.